Bonjour, zdravejte. Hello everybody. So it's a new solo for me this time. Basically I think one aspect that me personally, I think you've noticed that like Iglika is the one who is really into, let's say, the grammar aspect of languages. Me personally, I like how they interact with one another, and let's say in a fairly international setting. And that's why actually I was recommended the 100-year-old man who who jumped from the window and disappeared. That's the actual name of the name of the book. But there was a book released, a Swedish book released by Jonasson, and it was actually adapted into a film. And it's again, Netflix. I'm not very I'm not going for like a more alternative platforms, but one aspect that really interested me was we have an overall understanding of Scandinavian, and it's a Scandinavian art in general, as being very cold and dreary and a bit depressing. When you think of books, for example, when I think of Sweden, the first thing that comes to mind is the saga Millennium with I think it was Stig Larsson, if I'm not mistaken, and you have also the author. Was it the character was Kurt Wallander? Let me check. It was sorry for the white. It was Henning Mankell. Like basically the two big names, like let's say the contemporary writers that really emerged from Sweden back then was which are basically like very dark and gritty crime stories with like some detective or there's a detective, there's an alcoholic, like always some very dark stories with some people from Estonia being brought to and like being like some human trafficking, some pretty dark and depressing topics. When you look at the film and cinema front, so you have, let's say, of course the classic Bergman. So I'm sorry, I absolutely slaughter his name every time, and many people mix up Ingrid Bergman and Ingmar. Yeah, that's it, Ingmar Bergman. You have like you have the classic image of death playing a game of chess with death, like so not exactly a very happy topics. And it's kind of fun to see basically how Scandinavians would, at least Sweden, because when you say Scandinavia, you sort of lump several countries in one bag. And let's say, for example, Finland doesn't especially appreciate being like linked. It's a completely different language with very different roots. So in a sense, it's very similar to Hungary and like the rest of its neighbors. It's sort of interesting in this department. So in this film, you follow the day-to-day life of an old man, 100-year-old man, who basically escapes from a retirement home. And it's very interesting. At first, you notice that it's not exactly your typical old man. Like he went to a retirement house because he blew up his garden. It's like his back door. Like Fox killed his favorite pet, like his cat, and he decided to blow it up. So you see already that he's really into explosives. And the more you follow it's a film that sort of becomes completely absurd as it goes along. Like they're being chased by the police at first because it's just an old man that escaped. But then he finds some money from a biker gang that he stole from a gangster, like a British gangster that lives in Bali. So it's it gets they actually he finds another older man who sort of they lock up one of the bikers in a cold room, and the bikers die from the cold. It's very strange. And the funny aspect of it is like having a man who seems like perfectly normal, like not very bright, and have him in situations that seem completely crazy. And I think that's how that's another aspect of Scandinavia that you don't necessarily, at least Sweden, that you don't necessarily explore much, like the comical aspect of which is very similar to British humor in this regard. You have some very stoic man, like very seeming almost dull and boring, but being thrown in a completely crazy situations. And so in plays in also another cliche, and the film plays another cliche. It's also based on book, but it plays another cliche. The sort of the 20th century recap. You have the man who actually participated in Franco's War. So you have him progressively. You have him like. You don't even see the process of it, but like in one scene, he's just talking in Swedish to his first he fights for the anarchists and the revolutionaries, and then afterwards he gets tired of the war and ends up saving Franco's life, which is also really completely absurd. And in 2 scenes, he speaks perfect Spanish. And that's gonna be the rest of the film basically. Then he goes to the USA, and in 2 scenes he learns like perfect English. Like suddenly he's fluent in English. So he helps like the Americans create the atomic bomb. Then he goes back to Sweden. Nobody's interested in him. The Russians decide to take him on board, and he goes to the Soviet Union. Then again, 2 scenes he speaks perfect Russian. He meets Albert Einstein, stupid brother, basically, like the Herbert Einstein, which is really funny, like, cause you have. So if you count well, you have Swedish, you have Spanish, you have English, you have Russian, then you have a bit of German. So he ends up in the gulag with Einstein's the dumb brother, and then they escape from the gulag, of course, and he ends up in Paris. So you see, it has some completely absurdist elements to it, but it's extremely funny to see this completely typical boring Swedish man being basically thrown into some completely crazy historical context. And in this regard, it's almost a parody of Forrest Gump, because you really have like the craziness of it all, and you have a bit of the world history. In the sense, it's really quite amusing to see this unassuming Swedish man that has done so many things. You have some hints of different world cinema as well, like when he is in the biker interaction with the Englishman. There was one of the British actor was in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, as well as Snatch. So there's like some reminiscence of that. It's really quite amusing. And again, like the bits in Spain made me think of the Spanish cinema of a specific area. That would be a bit of a stretch, but I would recommend Guillermo del Toro, The Pan's Labyrinth, in this regard. It's quite touching. It's not exactly historically accurate. I mean, there are fairies and some dark fantasy element to it, but there's really this element of like the Frankist, like Franco, like the Frankist army, and like the revolutionaries trying to fight them. And and also you have the hints of like the spy films, like in fights between the Americans and the Russian, and the United States of America and the Soviet Union. So it's really quite amusing to see all that. He travels around. You see him. I've noticed Budapest. different areas. So it's a very, it's a what we would call in French film choral. And basically, you have a white cast. Is not the only the actor is not the only character in there. You've got he ends up forming a group of friends with Gunilla, if I'm not mistaken. It's a lady who has an elephant in her backyard. A man who studied absolutely like for years and years and years, but never actually managed to get a diploma. So he's almost specialized in at least a dozen of fields. An old crook like him. That's the man who actually stole a lot of well, basically a suitcase full of money that belonged to the biker gang. So as you can see, like from my sort of depiction of the film, it's very messy, but you need to follow it. It's not just me who was doing a pretty bad job at describing what it is. It's a very, very messy film, but it's really quite funny. And finally, as a last recommendation, I would also say it reminded me of a Bulgarian film that's called Mission London. And you get the same kind of crazy atmosphere with lots of unlikely events like happening all at once, and it's really fun. And yeah, that's another film that is very similar to this one, so another recommendation from me. So to conclude this video, it's refreshing to see something actually a bit happy coming from Sweden. Like for once, it's quite refreshing. And yeah, that was fun, man. I hope at least I got you a bit interested in it, and the usual stuff like subscribe, don't forget to all the YouTube stuff. All right, see ya.